at this sort of thing. Just then the Academy's bell rang, signaling the end of the day's studies. "And there is our signal," said Lilith. "What say you? Will you come with me?" Caleb still looked doubtful, but Eben squared his shoulders. "We will. Lead on." They rose and made their way to the stairs, then down to the ground floor. As they made for the hallways, they all nodded cordially at Instructor Gia, who gave them a wan smile. She had returned only that day after being tended to by healers. Ezra had not had her long under the mind word, and so the after effects had been mild. Daska would be a far longer time in healing, or so it was said. Lilith took them out upon the streets of the city and then to an inn a little ways away. It was a small place, tucked down a side street Eben had often passed but never noticed, and no sign hung over the door. The common room seemed little used, and the innkeeper gave Lilith barely a glance as the group entered, passed through, and ascended the stairs. Caleb looked all about them with curiosity, and Eben knew he was doing the same. Theron, however, acted as though nothing were out of the ordinary. Clearly she had been here before. "What is this place?" said Eben. Lilith stopped before a door and produced a key from her sleeve to open it. "Why, this is my room." "Your room?" said Eben. "Why do you pay for a room here when you live in the academy?" Her eyes widened as and she glanced at Theron, who shrugged. "I keep it under rent for just such a purpose as this. Do you not have such a room for yourself?" Eben flushed, for though he had never thought of such a thing, now it seemed plainly obvious that he should have. "I do not." Lilith shook her head and led them inside. The room contained nothing remarkable, only a low, wide bed and some other plain furniture. She went to an armoire and threw it open. Within, Eben saw many dresses and other suits of clothes of every color and make. "Take what you will," said Lilith. "None have seen use in some time, for they are all laundered." "I'm afraid I'm a little too small," said Caleb. "True, but there is not much we can do about that," said Lilith. "I shall give you the shortest pants I have, and you can tuck them into those high boots you wear." Theron, meanwhile, went to the rack and shucked off her academy robes at once. Caleb and Lilith both went beet red and turned away. "Theron," said Caleb. "Your embarrassment is no concern of mine," said Theron. "And Lilith, you need not act as though this is anything new to you." "Oh, just get it over with," said Lilith. Eben could not help but smirk at Caleb and even at Lilith. "I may not be a commoner exactly, but the two of you are too easily flustered, I think. They are only underclothes." He joined Theron in disrobing and looked over the clothes hanging before them. Several thin wooden rods ran from one side of the cabinet to the other, and on these had been hung a variety of outfits. He chose a pair of pants of dark muted blue and a light gray tunic under a vest of black. Theron took a dress of yellow that reminded him of his family's colors, much to his surprise. "Could you," she muttered, turning. Eben reached for the strings that tied it at her neck, but they were intricately laced at the back, and his fingers fumbled over them. "Oh, let me," said Lilith. Theron hesitated only a moment before turning to let her take them. Eben saw how Lilith's cheeks darkened still further, and she kept her eyes fixed rigidly on the strings. He could not help a secret grin. "Mayhap I think I shall wait outside," said Caleb, who sounded ready to die from embarrassment. "Come off it," said Eben. "Live like the rest of us, royal son, and get yourself dressed. We do not have all night." His face was a portrait in discomfort, but Caleb did it, though he made sure to select his entire outfit before he disrobed, and did it as quickly as possible. Lilith acted much the same, and if anything she seemed more uncomfortable than the boy was. Theron and Eben stood back, looking at each other with raised eyebrows and little shakes of the head. But while Eben kept his eyes studiously averted, respecting the other's discomfort, he noticed Theron's eyes continued to wander, and she swallowed hard and often. Chapter 17. Once the business was done, Lilith rushed them out of the room. Their academy robes they left strewn on the bed. They will not be disturbed, and we will return for them, said Lilith. They went out upon the streets. Lilith had given them all cloaks of brown, plain but lined. Lilith had given them all cloaks of brown. Plain but lined with fur. They drew their hoods up around their faces, and now Eben noticed that they no longer drew the half-curious looks that academy students did when walking about. At last he thought he saw the reason for the deception. No one remarks upon us, he said. And why should they, said Lilith. We could be anyone, merchants, cobblers, even beggars. Theron snorted. You are blinded by your own coin purse if you think any beggar wears clothes this fine, she said. But they draw the eye less readily, mayhap, than the academy's black. Lilith took them north and west and made no attempt to set their trail to winding. She was not, it seemed, afraid of being followed. Eben began to get a familiar sense as though he had been in this part of the city before, but he could not place it. Then it came to him. They were very near to the inn where he had once met an agent of his family's and delivered the uniform of a palace guard. For a heart-stopping moment he was afraid that they made for the same inn, but then he spotted the street where it lay, and Lilith passed it by. He let out a sigh of relief. Theron glanced at him. What is it? He shook his head. Nothing. At last Lilith stopped them before the black-painted door of a tavern. Here she paused for a moment, looking in every direction from beneath her hood. We will enter and move straight to the back, she said. There is a private room there where Farah is waiting. Do not glance up nor meet the eye of any one else. The fewer who remark upon our arrival, the better. Eben heard the sounds of conversation and laughter from within. It sounds a fair crowd inside. I doubt we need worry of drawing much attention. Let us hope you are right, said Lilith, and she pushed the door open. They all steadied their feet as they pressed into the bustling interior. Lilith led the way between the tables, and Eben was only partially aware of the patrons they passed. Indeed, his guess seemed to be right. As far as he could tell, no one gave them so much as a first glance. Soon they had passed through the crowd and in the short hallway ending in a door. Lilith opened it without knocking and drew them all inside. At last Eben looked up and threw back his hood. He found himself in a small room with every wall showing its bare wood and exposed beams above that looked to form the underside of the building's second floor. They gave the ceiling a little extra height so that it felt less cramped than it should have, considering its small size. Lanterns burned in the corner, filling the place with a warm light. There was also a window in the back wall, and though the curtains were drawn across it, he could feel a slight breeze that told him it was cracked open. In the middle of the room was a table, and at the table sat a woman. She looked similar enough to Lilith, not only the same rich, dark skin, but the pronounced cheekbones and the haughty, discerning brow. But she showed more fat than Lilith, and also she filled out her rich green dress more. She seemed less severe and more motherly, though that was belied by the sharp glint in her eyes as she took them all in. Good eve, I suppose. Sit, or do not, for it is no matter to me. There is wine. Eben bowed. Well met, lady. No, said the woman, clucking her tongue. You know my name, knew it before you came here. I know yours as well, especially yours. She gave Theron a sharp nod. So we need not introduce ourselves, for who knows what ears may be lurking, and who knows how little time we have. Sit and take wine if you will, but let us get on with this as quickly as we may. Caleb gave Eben a wary look. Eben shrugged and dragged out a chair to sit across the table from Farah. Caleb sat beside him and Theron to his left, while Lilith took the chair on Theron's other side. Farah leaned forwards and opened her mouth to speak, but paused as Theron reached for the bottle of wine. Theron noticed and poured the wine far more slowly than she might have. It made Lilith smirk into her cup, while Farah's lips pursed in annoyance. When her cup was full to the brim, Theron turned. Do you care for a cup, Eben? I do, said Eben. He snatched the bottle from her hand, though I will pour it myself, and you may carry on with what you meant to say, my lady. Farah raised an eyebrow. A quick study. That is good. I have little to say and much to hear. Tell me what you have seen of the girl Ezra and what you have not seen but have heard about. The more you know, the better. The less you guess at, the better. Eben was about to speak when Theron took her first sip. She slurped at the cup and smacked her lips when she was done. You goldbags drink the finest stuff. At the word goldbag, Farah's nostrils flared. Caleb's glare deepened. Enough, Theron. We all know of your disdain for the wealthy, and if our host did not know it before, she knows it now. Consider your point made. Hey, what's up, Nicole? Sorry I missed you. I'm so focused today. Oh, God. Theron's eyes widened. She pressed a hand to her breast. Me? I am wounded, and besides, our host has been most clear that she wishes for no names to be used, including mine. Please, I ask that you honor her wishes. My apologies for my companion, Eben interjected. We will tell you what we know and be as thorough as ever we can. He proceeded to tell her everything they knew of Isra, that is, the official version of what they knew of Isra. Of course, he told her nothing about Zane's home nor about the amulet of Kakit, but he told her about their fight in the kitchens, painting it so that it sounded like Theron managed to catch Isra by surprise. Kristen! When he said that, Faraz's eyes drew to pinholes. Very unfortunate, she said. It sounded as though she meant to say more, but she did not. Very fortunate, she said. Fortunate indeed, said Eben, meeting her eye without flinching. Then he went on to tell her all the rumors that had floated about the Academy since, including a rumor that the faculty were investigating to see if anyone were helping Isra from within. Lilith seemed surprised at that. Of course, that was not truly a rumor, but something they had learned from Dasko. Yay! When they had finished, Farah pursed her lips and steepled her hands. She sat that way for a little while, reaching for a wine cup every so often, her eyes studying Eben's. Eben tried not to look uncomfortable, though he was not quite sure he succeeded. Our family's particular trade goods have been on the move recently, said Farah, speaking suddenly and from nowhere, in a tone that suggested she was answering a question, though no one had asked. They were long held in reserve, for no one wished to traffic them after the attack. Now they move again, though slowly, nowhere near so brazenly as they once did. Theron leaned forwards. And where are the mage... No, barked Farah, scowling at her. No, we do not discuss them. They are our family's particular trade goods. That is all they are to me and to you, or this conversation is over. We understand, said Eben. He fixed Theron with a look, and we will take that into consideration as we ask our questions. He could see the visible effort she exerted to keep from rolling her eyes. And where are your family's particular trade goods being moved to? Here, there, it is never wise for them to move always from one place to another, for that makes them easy to find, predictable. But someone is moving them, and some are disappearing. Those, I would imagine, are what you seek. Where are they disappearing to? Said Lilith. I would not imagine they could simply vanish without repercussion. None unless those who mete out punishment for such things know where they are going and thus restrain their hands, said Farah. That, I think, is what goes on here. I spotted it, of course. I saw that the numbers did not add up, that 100 packets would leave and only 95 packets would arrive, but when I told them, the ones who mete out punishment for such things, they thanked me for my diligent work, and then they told me to return to it, and no punishment was meted out. Yet you do not know where, said Eben. I do not know where, said Farah, but that is not the right question. There are 5 questions, only 5 and always 5, and one leads to the next. Where, said Lilith, when, how, why, and whom? Farah sniffed. Who, then, said Theron. A name, said Farah. The only name tonight. A name banished by the family and then reclaimed. A name that renounced another name to regain favor in the eyes of the king's law. A name that has used that favor to violate the king's law again, thereby putting our clan in danger once more, as though he did not learn the lesson the first time. Gregor. Lilith sucked in a sharp breath, but to Eben the name meant nothing, and looking at Caleb and Theron, he saw that they knew nothing more than he did. Nothing more than he did. What is it, said Eben. Who is Gregor? She will tell you later, for we draw near the end, said Farah. But wait, said Lilith. I thought he was banished, along with... Only one name tonight, said Farah. Only one name now that matters. Very well, but in any case he was exiled. He returned and threw himself upon the High King's mercy. He told her things that seemed of great value in the coming war. Did he tell her the truth? How can we know unless we too know the truth? But it earned him forgiveness, and now when I see 100 become 95, I see also the name of Gregor. Abruptly she pushed her chair back and stood. Thank you for your words and for the meanings behind them. I hope you have found my words as valuable, but now we must leave, and I doubt we shall ever speak again. Eben found his feet at once. And thank you. We will breathe no word of this. If I thought you would, I would not have come, said Farah. She looked hard at Lilith for a moment. You did right to come to me. Make sure you never do it again, or both our lives may be forfeit. She swept past them with the billowing of a green cloak and left them looking at each other around the table. Theron noisily swallowed the last of her cup and moved to pour another. Oh, Theron, you so crazy. Chapter 18. Lilith led them back to the street and then southeast towards the inn where she kept her room. The moons had risen high now and the sun was almost gone, so they walked in a mostly silver light that reflected into their eyes from the snow. The moons had risen high now, and the sunlight had almost faded in the west, so they walked in a mostly silver light that reflected into their eyes from the snow. For a while they were all silent, staring at the ground, except for Caleb, who looked up at the stars, but after a while Evan raised his head. Thank you, Lilith, for helping us. She shrugged, not meeting his gaze. It is the least I could do, I suppose. What do you plan to do now, after what you have learned? I have friends who can find Gregor. They were already looking for Isra, but she must be in one of the darker holes upon the seat. Let us hope Gregor is not so well concealed. He most likely is, said Lilith. Gregor's a man of both means and wit, not the clever kind, but the cunning, ruthless kind, the kind that leaves corpses in its wake. I think he will be much harder to find than some student exiled from the academy. I also have some people of means and wit, said Eben, a little annoyed. Mayhap, but you do not have Gregor. Lilith shivered as though they were tramping doggedly through the snow, and their blood was up. I have heard only a very few tales of him, and yet they paint him as more of a monster than a man. Once he accompanied a caravan through the Spine Ridge. They were waylaid there by a storm, a freak summer snow that forced them to take refuge in a little town. Somehow, during their stay, the townsfolk discovered the mage stones and they were transporting. Some curious child poked their nose into the wrong wagon. When word got about, Gregor spoke to the townspeople, promising to pay them to keep their silence. The townsfolk agreed readily enough, for the Yaren party already paid well for their food and lodging. So for a week the caravan remained in the town, and the guards slept in the town's inn and drank in the town's tavern. They likely bedded some of the townsfolk. At last the storm abated. Gregor brought all the folk into the town hall to receive their pay. He waited until they had all arrived, for he had promised them all a gold weight, even the children. First he gave them their money, and then he locked the front door and burned the hall to the ground. He and his men stood watch to make sure no one escaped through the windows. When at last the flames died out, he made a soldier search through the corpses to recover every bit of gold he had paid out. Emma did not remember when they all stopped walking, but at some point they had, and now they stood in a little circle watching Lilith in horrified silence. Now he felt sick, as though he might retch into the gutter, and he knew the chill in his bones was not from the cold air. That is monstrous, said Caleb. It must be false. Surely the High King would not stand for such an act. What makes you think word of it ever reached her ears? Said Theron, spitting the words. Do you think her courtiers let such troubling rumors invade the royal court? It is easier for the merchants and the royals both if they do not discuss such things, and after all, it sounds as if there were no witnesses. But that is not the conduct of the wealthy. It is the atrocity of a monster. Caleb sounded indignant, but he could find no sympathy in Theron's face, nor even any understanding. You cannot think all merchants are that way, certainly not the royalty. Oh, you think the royalty are exempt, said Theron. You know how Ezra became an orphan as well as I do. But that is one king, said Caleb. You're no fool, Caleb, and only a fool thinks any gold bag in Underrealm has entirely clean hands. Caleb opened his mouth to object again. Eben spoke first. Let it be, Caleb. Caleb gaped at him, astonished. You cannot say you agree with her. I know your family and Lilith's have reputations, but I said let it be. Eben could not meet Theron's eyes, for he could almost feel the fury glowing off her. And when he once would have agreed with Caleb that her hatred of the rich and the powerful was misguided at best and born of jealousy at the worst, now he could not put fire in such a belief. It grows late, said Lilith, rubbing her arms. We should move on. They took her advice, pressing on through the light snow that had begun to fall. Theron was the next to speak after a long silence. The white-hot anger had gone from her voice, but Eben still heard it smoldering, quelled for the moment, but not gone. Why is she waiting? She has more artifacts. We know she took them from Zane's house. Why delay? They kept walking in silence, for no one had an answer. The next morning, Eben sent a letter to Adara, asking her to search the Lovers' Guild for news of Gregor. He was not sure what to expect. After all, he had already asked her to seek for Ezra, and that had returned nothing yet. But the very next afternoon, he received a letter in response, asking him to come and see her at once in her home. It was Sunday, and he had no other demands upon his time, so he fetched his winter cloak and set out into the city. The snow that had been falling for the last few weeks had subsided at last, and though the air was still sharp with winter's chill, the sky above was a deep and pure blue. It stood in sharp contrast to the snowy roofs of the city's buildings, and the sun leapt bright from every surface, so that Eben had to shield his eyes. Adara answered his knock almost at once and led him upstairs after he stamped his boots free from snow. She had set out a small tray of figs, cheese, and bread, and at first they ate in silence, but soon Adara leaned back in her chair, dabbing at her lips with a napkin. I have found your man, she said, yet I hesitate to tell you where. Ebna blinked. Why? What is wrong? She studied him for a moment, lips twitching towards a frown. Why do you seek Gregor at all? He is the one moving Yaren's mage stones. He is our best chance to find Ezra and thus to capture her. I have heard many stories of this man, Eben. He is a fell and grim warrior, prone not only to violence, but to cruelty when he kills. The family Yaren is known for ruthlessness, but his reputation sets him above even the rest of them. Eben shivered. Well, I mean to set Mako upon him, and so I suppose we will find out who is the more terrible. Adara shook her head. Do not pretend that you will be free from danger in this. Why should I put you in harm's way? You are already Ezra's enemy. Must you add Gregor's name to the list of those who wish harm upon you? That forced a grim laugh from his gut. He spread his hands. When that list is so long, what is one more entry? She sighed. Very well. He has been seen on the western end of the seat, going in and out of the sewers that may be found there. Some whisper that the family Yaren conducts its smuggling through some hidden port, though no one knows exactly where it may be found. That is good, said Eben. Mako knows the sewers well, and doubtless he will be able to find their hiding place. I'm surprised you learned this so quickly when your connections have still been unable to find Ezra, wherever she may be lurking. Adara frowned at that. I, too, have been troubled. I, too, have been troubled by that. Gregor has all the backing of Yaren at his disposal, as well as their considerable coin. I cannot think how Isra has concealed herself better than he has, especially after she was spotted within the academy itself. That should have sent word rippling through the streets like a stone dropped into a calm lake. Eben thought of what Mako had said in the abandoned manor of the family scarred. Ripples, you say. You're not the first to describe them to me. Yet she moves like a ghost, a spectre already dead, and leaves no trace. And, too, she withholds her hand, though we do not know why. It has been a week since she revealed herself, more than enough time, it seems to me, to try again. There must be other things afoot, and mayhap Gregor has something to do with them, said Adara. Wondering about it may do little good. Be grateful instead, and act quickly before it is too late. Too much later, you mean, said Eben. It is already too late for Orin and Creedell and poor little Volley. Adara nodded solemnly and let the names of the dead linger in silence for a while. Then she stood. Would you have wine? It is a touch early, but when has that stopped either of us? He grinned. Do you mean to get me drunk again? I am not sure I can survive another night like the last. She laughed. No, not that. My head still twinges with pain at that memory. She paused for a moment to look at him. But I thank you for joining me in that. I know it was an odd request and had its consequences, yet I do not regret it. Nor I, said Eben. She returned to the table and he took his goblet, and I will never forget the words we spoke, nor the promises I made to you. I should hope not. I very much intend to hold you to them. His smile felt somewhat forced. Yet near the end of the drinking anyway, I remember you told me something about truth and how it came hard to you even then. Her smile grew careful. Did I? Mayhap my thoughts grew muddled. The words came easily enough, but he heard the warning behind them. Let it be, please. Mayhap it was my wits that were addled, not yours, he said lightly. You told me so many things, after all, that I had never heard before. I was honored to learn them, and would do so again if you ever wished it. Recognition dawned in her eyes, an acknowledgment of his unspoken invitation. Thank you, she whispered. And then she sighed and straightened, and the moment passed them both by. She ran a finger along the rim of her mug. I understand you have spent much time in Lilith's company of late. More to the point, I understand Theron has as well. Eben's eyebrows shot up. And who have you heard that from? The guild carries many whispers, and I do not listen only for the ones you ask me to. He sighed. I admit Lilith still makes me uneasy. Theron seems to trust her utterly, well, better than I do at any rate, but I do not know how much of that stems from good sense and how much stems from her feelings. She still loves Lilith, then. I asked her that when Lilith was imprisoned, and she said she did not know, yet her every action tells me that she does. It is not only the trust she places in Lilith, it is the little looks, the smiles, and the half-hidden gestures. The way her hand moves toward Lilith as though aching to hold her, I can scarcely believe the change in her demeanor, considering how she despised Lilith when I first met her. Often love springs forth unbidden, said Adara. When it does, it is rarely governed by sense. Eben smiled. Do you think of Theron and Lilith, or of us? She kicked him beneath the table, but gently. I think we are more sensible about things than many. Nor do I doubt Theron's judgment in this. She is a passionate woman, governed more by her heart than by her head, yet she has wit enough to know evil from good. She placed her trust in you quickly, though she had more reason than most to despise a merchant boy. If you are grateful for that trust, return it now. After all, is Lilith not proving herself helpful? He frowned. Helpful enough, I suppose, yet it is all in the service of catching Isra, whom she hates, and I have bitter memories of her treatment when I first arrived at the academy. Children may be cruel, but not be evil. Eben glared at her. She is older than I am. Do you call me a child? She returned his frown, though her nose twitched as though she longed to smile. You are newly come to manhood, Eben, though you had little opportunity to ever be a child in truth. That brought to mind a question he had never thought to ask, and he cocked his head. How old are you? She smiled. Do you see wrinkles in my skin? Have you come to regret our tryst? Do you love me only for my beauty? That cannot be, for who could call me more beautiful than any of the fine ladies you must have met throughout your life? He stood suddenly, and she yelped as he lifted her from her chair, holding her across his chest while she laced her fingers behind his neck. I would call you so 1,000 times, though the mystics put me beneath their knives and commanded me to renounce your grace. But you have not answered my question. Tell me how many summers you have seen, or I may have to draw the truth from you by every means at my disposal. Do your worst, she purred. Brown chicken, brown cow! Chapter 19. They spent the day doing little of consequence, and it was evening before Eben left her at last. The sun had almost gone down, and he hurried through torchlight. He had time enough before curfew to return, but he had no wish to remain in the cold a moment longer than necessary. The streets seemed curiously crowded for a Sunday, when many merchants and crafters chose not to work. But then the city had become flooded with new arrivals recently. Eben was not sure why, except for some vague rumors that the High King soon meant to make her next move in the war. Eben soon tired of struggling through crowds and having to halt for every passing carriage or wagon of goods. He broke away from the press, aiming for the yawning mouth of an alley that seemed to head the right direction, but when he reached the end and turned north rather than south, he grumbled and increased his pace. Soon he saw the alley's end ahead, leading to another street packed even tighter than the last one. He pushed into the crowds with a sigh, forcing his way across and into another side street. Here at last the way was clear, and it even headed in the right direction for a time. Eben let loose a breath of relief and slowed. A boot scuffed on the street behind him. He turned. The street was empty. His heart began to race, but he scowled and fought the queasy feeling in his stomach. Zane, it seemed, was not done stalking him. He had a chilling thought. Had the Dean seen him leave Adara's house? But he dismissed that fear at once. No matter what Zane suspected him of, Eben did not fear the Dean would threaten Adara. Hunching his shoulders, he pushed on through the cold. Side street led him south, but it kept turning the wrong direction as it did so. Soon he had neared the seat's western edge, where the building showed more sign of damage from the fighting and the flames, and there were fewer people about. And then he came upon a street where there were no other passers-by at all. 3 quick footsteps sounded shockingly close, but when he turned, the street remained empty. He put his hands to his hips. Enough of this. I can hear you, Zane, scuttling after me like some pickpocket. If you have received another note, I still know nothing about it. But come out and ask me anyway, if that is your wish, so that we may both go about our evenings in peace. The person who stepped from the shadows was not Zane. Eben froze. He could see no face beneath the green hood, but the person who faced him was a behemoth, nearly as large as Perrin and clad in mail under their cloak. There came a hiss of drawn steel. A broadsword glinted in the moonlight. Eben could not drag his gaze from its shine. Thick, heavy boots crunched in the snow, forming holes as deep as Eben's whole leg. Zane? Yes. What? What about Zane? Forming holes as deep as Eben's whole leg. Who? Eben took a step back, almost stumbling in a drift behind him. The figure reached up to drag its hood back. It was a man, his skin almost as dark as Lilith's, and within his salad his gray eyes reeked of death. His fists looked big enough to envelop and crush Eben's skull. Oh, you didn't know Zane was in the Academy Journals? Yeah, man. Yeah, he jumps stories. His fist looked big enough to envelop and crush Eben's skull. Where Eben had often been awed by the thickness and vigor of Mako's muscular arms, this man now made Mako seem a spindly little boy, a bookish scholar tucked in some dark basement away from the sun, scrawny as Calum was. Over the chain on the man's chest was a tabard of black leather, and his fist shone with plate. All this Eben saw in the scant seconds it took the giant to approach him. They were only 2 lengthy paces apart now, but then he stopped. "You've been seeking me." The voice from his barrel-wide chest thrummed in Eben's lungs, deeper and stronger than Ezra's voice, even with the strength of magestones, and at the words, knowledge struck Eben like a mace to the forehead. Don't worry about it. I think you'll enjoy him. Gregor, he stammered. You are Gregor. There came no answer, but the man's eyes flashed, and Eben recalled the story that Lilith had told him. In his mind, he saw the hall filled with people, burning, all of them screaming. His throat seized up. He tried to take a backward step, but his feet would not move. "Why has your family taken an interest in me?" said Gregor. He took 1 step forwards, and Eben wilted. I did not. Gregor shook his head, a single sharp jerk. "No lies. As long as your words interest me, you will live. As long as I hear the truth within them, you will live. You die tonight, but it is up to you how long you have before then." Like a striking serpent, a hand the size of a boulder shot forth to seize Eben's robes and haul him up off the ground. Eben lost control of his bladder, and tears stung his eyes as piss dripped to the snow below him. "I sought nothing," he whimpered, voice shattering to a sob. "I swear it." A lie, he screamed in his mind. A lie means death, but he could not help it. His thoughts betrayed him, for he knew now that he would die, here on this street and unseen by anyone. But then behind Gregor, from the other side of the street, a second shadow detached itself from the darkness between 2 buildings. Eben heard a soft snick and saw the silhouette of 2 daggers. Mako, he thought with relief. He let his gaze linger too long. Gregor caught the look, and he turned on the spot, faster than such a man should have been able to move. Mako leapt, black cloak fluttering behind him. Gregor caught the daggers on his sword and shoved back with a rumbling grunt. Mako danced, shifting from one foot to the next before striking again. Again Gregor parried the blow, swinging the sword in a wide arc and slicing down with it, but Mako was already gone. They took a step back, taking each other's measure in the darkness. Eben wanted to step forwards to do something, but he knew not what. He was a child in this battle of giants. What good would mists be if he must draw within Gregor's reach to use them, and he could not help Mako by shifting stone. Then a hand seized his shoulder to drag him back. Had he not already voided himself, he would surely have soiled his clothes again. "Come, boy," said a woman's voice. "You are of little use here." "It's Talib! Yay!" He looked back and saw that she was clad just like Mako and had her hair trimmed close to her scalp. 2 steps he took beside her, away from Gregor before he stopped. "We cannot leave Mako," he gasped. "That is not Mako," said the woman. "Come." Eben peered closer in the darkness, and then he saw that it was the truth. The man standing before Gregor was tall enough, but not quite as broad, and his eyes glinted blue beneath his hood instead of dark like Mako's. Now the assassin's knives swept forward like serpents, striking here, there, and here again in the space of a blink, but though Gregor held no shield, he used his plated arm to block one of the blows while the others glanced from his chain. And then his fist swung, faster than when he had seized Eben, and crushed the Drayden man's face. The assassin stopped moving all at once, as though a force holding him up had suddenly vanished. He held his feet for a heartbeat, as though his nose was pulp and his jaw hung slack on tendons, displaying shattered teeth. Gregor seized his head, fingers wrapping to the back of the man's skull. With the grip for leverage, he pulled the assassin onto his broadsword. 4 handbreadths of blood-covered steel thrust out of the man's spine, and his legs went limp. Gregor withdrew the sword and smashed the front of his helmet into the man's face. Then he brought the man's head down with a crunch against his armored knee. The Drayden man slumped to the snow, a corpse 3 times over. Even as she pulled Eben away, the woman threw a dagger with a hiss of rage. It struck Gregor in his back, but it was rebuffed by the chain and fell impotent to the snow. Gregor threw a look over his shoulder, but then Eben was around the corner of the building and out of sight, still being dragged by the woman. Now that he no longer beheld the giant, Eben found he could move again, and he ran, faster even than his rescuer. After they had passed a few streets, she yanked him to face her. He looked into her hard face, wincing at the scar that ran from her upper lip through one ruined eye. Back to the academy, she growled. Stop for nothing. Look at nothing. Speak to no one, and if you value your life, do not leave again for any reason, not unless Mako is with you. I forgot about Talib's scar. Eben wanted to stay a moment longer to ask her one more question, but even as he hesitated, she seized his shoulder and whirled him around. I forgot about her scar, yeah. Now I'm remembering, I think we talked about it when we were discussing what she looked like and everything, but yeah. Then she planted a boot on his back and kicked hard. Eben went sprawling to the ground, sliding along in the slush with a cry. Leave, you piss-stained steer! He left, scrambling to his feet and barely remaining upright. Once he started running, he could not stop, but could only move his legs faster and faster. Soon he was winded, and his chest screamed at him in pain, but he only sprinted harder. He reached the main road that crossed the island east to west, and passed heedless through the people there. Many of them he struck in his fight, but he did not stop for their angry shouts. Before long, he reached the academy's front door. 2 paces away from it, he stopped and doubled over to catch his breath, crying out as that sent lances of pain into his ribs. He looked back down the street. Gregor was nowhere to be seen, nor was any other threat. The tears that had threatened now spilled forth, and bile leapt to the back of his throat. His mind burned with the images of the Drayden man falling to the ground, of the nauseating way his bones had bent the wrong direction. Falling to hands and knees, he vomited and saw all the wine he had drunk with Adar, and all the food he had eaten for supper spill into the virgin snow. It was a while before he could force himself to stand. His body groaned in protest when he did, and his legs were clay beneath him. But as soon as he could, he stumbled towards the front door. From the position of the moons in the sky, he had only just made it before curfew, and so he wasted no time before entering. There in the front hall, to his great surprise, he found Theron and Caleb waiting for him. But if they saw the state of him, they did not remark upon it. And once he saw their pale faces and wide, frightened eyes, he knew that his encounter upon the street was not the only thing that had gone terribly wrong. What is it? He said. What happened? War is declared, said Theron. Tomorrow the armies of the High King march on Dolmoon. Dun, dun, dun! A break time for me. Gonna take a brief break, and then I will be back. Hey, we're back. Really? I didn't know that trick. Oh, today might be a nap day. Yes, indeed. Chapter 20. For a moment, Eben could only stand and stare at the news, but then the pain in his side redoubled and he stumbled. Here now, said Caleb, as he and Theron came forward to take Eben's arms. Eben, what is... Then his nose curled. Have you... Eben blinked back fresh tears. I need a bath. Please, help me. They cringed, but they helped him, taking an arm each and escorting him to the bathing room, which fortunately was not far away. There he disrobed while Caleb went to fetch him water. Theron took his soiled robes and put him in a soapy basin to soak. What happened, said Caleb, once Eben had settled into the water and his friend sat to either side of him. Gregor found me. Eben shuddered at the memory of the man's soulless gray eyes. Somehow he heard that we were seeking him, and he found me out in the streets. Oh, Wordwin's here. Everybody's names are green. Ah, it's so confusing. 3 different shades of green. Wonderful. Theron scowled. How did you defeat him? I did not, said Eben. He stopped, for his voice was dangerously close to breaking, and closed his eyes. I did not, he said again when he could speak. I ran, and I only escaped because 2 of Mako's fighters came to my rescue. Did they... Is Gregor... Theron glanced over his shoulder to make sure no one could overhear, but the bathing room was empty. They did not kill him, said Eben. He killed one of them instead and has killed the other by now, for she turned back after she got me to safety. Gregor did not simply kill. He took the man apart. I've never seen anything so terrifying. It was worse than watching Mako put Matami to the question. How did he find you, said Caleb. What will you do now? I do not know, said Eben. The woman who saved me warned me not to leave the academy again, not for anything, unless it was at Mako's direction and under his guard. That seems wise, said Caleb, shivering. Theron glared and remained silent. Enough talk of that, said Eben. I do not wish to think of it any longer. Now tell me of your news. When did Enelin declare war? They told him all that they had learned so far. That day, while Eben was with Adar, the High King Enelin had proclaimed that her host went to make war upon Dolmoon. What fleet she had managed to assemble set sail... What fleet she had managed to assemble would set sail from the eastern docks, while a great force of soldiers even now marched east across Veldemar to attack Dolmoon's northern lands. What of the south, said Eben. If the High King's armies meant to march on Dolmoon's southern reaches at well, that would take them near to Idris. Nothing was said of it, said Caleb. She may be hesitant to march her armies along the north side of the Spine Ridge, or mayhap she means to attack there and is keeping the plan secret, at least for now. That brings to mind my chief question, said Theron. Why would she proclaim any of this? Would it not be better to strike in secret, taking Dolmoon by surprise? Eben had thought the same thing, but Caleb shook his head at once. She does not hope to vanquish Dolmoon by means of war. That could be costly in both lives and coin, and we are in the midst of winter. But for months now, ever since the attack, all the 9 kingdoms have become mired by indecision. Only 3 kingdoms have openly pledged their support to the High King. Selvin, the land from which Enelin herself came, Hedgeman, my homeland, and Calentin, whose people are so few and so far from the war that their support makes little difference either way, even if they had not sent only a token of their strength, which they have. Thank you, Nightbot. The other kingdoms hem and haw, neither breaking their oaths nor rushing to fulfill them. By declaring this war openly and putting forth an assault, the High King means to prompt the other kingdoms to action. Now their oaths compel them to lend aid. And if they do not sit there, they will be branded traitors, said Caleb. When the war is over and Enelin has vanquished Dolmoon, she will then turn her armies upon the kingdoms that refuse to aid her. She will cast their kings down and purge their families or exile them if she feels merciful. That is a small mercy, said Theron. But are we even certain she will vanquish Dolmoon? Of that there is no doubt, said Caleb. Dorsey will now pledge its full strength. Their king is already fearful of Enelin's wrath, for she nearly executed him after the Battle of Wellmont. And Dorsey alone would be enough. Even if the other kingdoms stay their hands, which I doubt, Enelin will have enough backing to raise Dolmoon. She knows it and Dolmoon knows it, and so she hopes they will surrender. Theron raised her eyebrows. You seem very certain of all this. Caleb shrugged. I have been taught the ways of such things since birth. Nice. Where common children learn to trade and merchant children learn to manage coin, royal children are taught the ways of power and war. Then Dolmoon will surrender and this war will soon end, said Theron. I do not think so, Caleb said sadly. Bodil of the family Valgoon is their king, and she is a warlike woman. Bodil Valgoon. Also, she knows that if she surrenders, her life and the lives of her close kin will be forfeit. Therefore, she will fight as long as she can, if only to stave off the inevitable. I think that is another part of Enelin's plan. She hopes to amass as much strength of arms as she can, hoping that either Bodil will surrender, or that one of her kin will rebel against her, depose her from the throne, and surrender in her place. But there shall be much bloodshed before that happens either way. They were all silent for a moment. Eben thought he could almost imagine it, the great legions of soldiers marching across Veldemar on their way to fight and die upon the soil of Dolmoon, and the fleets of ships that even now sped across the great... that would tomorrow speed. To do battle with their foes' mighty fleets. It was a chilling vision and one not easily dismissed. What does the Academy mean to do? Said Eben. They both stared at him. What do you mean? Said Theron. The Academy means to do nothing unless it is to keep training its students in the ways of magic. It is a school, not a barracks. Eben gaped. So we are meant to just carry on with our studies, going to class each day as though a war is not being waged beyond these walls? The seat is in the middle of this fight, and I do not mean only because the High King dwells here. If Dolmoon launches a fresh attack, we will be the first thing in their way. Again, Caleb shook his head. The seat is not in danger. It is heavily fortified, and there are many other places along the Great Bay where Dolmoon would have an easier time of it. They only attacked the seat in the first place because they hope to overwhelm it quickly and with the element of surprise. When they attacked it, it was only after luring the High King's armies away with subterfuge, and even then they struck quickly, hoping to win through surprise rather than strength of arms. Now they have lost that and will... Now they have lost surprise and will make their war in other ways, as long as they may. He gave a little smile. If you hope to escape your lessons for a time, I'm afraid to tell you that Perrin will still expect you in your place every morning for your studies. They sat in silence. It was strange. Outwardly, nothing looked to have changed, yet Eben felt as though everything was different in some ethereal manner he could not see with his waking eyes. The objects in the room seemed fresh and newly seen, as though of course he had beheld them many times before. War has come, he said. War has been here a while, sit there, and now comes justice. I am not so sure, said Caleb, but now I think must come sleep, or we shall all regret it in the morning. Eben sat up in the water. Please stay. I will be quick, but after tonight I do not want to be alone. Caleb lowered his gaze. Of course, I did not think of that. Forgive me. And so they stayed until the water was tepid and Eben lifted himself out of it, and they all went to bed. But the moment they parted ways at the dormitories, Eben felt a chill steal over him, and no matter how long he sat before the hearth in the common room, he could not dispel it. He went to bed at last, a long time later, and drifted off with his thoughts haunted by a pair of soulless gray eyes. Chapter 20. Chapter 21. A hush had settled over the academy the next day. Eben felt it from the moment he woke. The way no one spoke as they dressed themselves and left the dormitory. The threat of war had hung in the air ever since the attack on the seat. Now the threat was over, for war had arrived. He did not know what they all expected to be different, for they all knew the fighting would take place far away, but he could feel the expectation in himself as well as the other students that something must happen. They muddled through their morning classes, but by the time his lesson finished, Eben felt the need for fresh air. He pushed ahead against the crowds of students headed for the dining hall and went outside instead. His steps carried him to the grounds where the alchemy students practiced their spells and where he had once seen them stop arrows in mid-flight. A rack of weapons stood, all of them either dull or padded, stood against the wall. He ran his fingers over them, lifting them a bit, only to let them clank against the rack again. How long would it be before he studied here, learning his own spells of defense? How long until he could defend himself if he landed in a fight like he had the night before? He heard only a single footstep on the grass behind him. Then a hand snatched his neck and whirled him around, slamming him into the granite wall of the citadel. It clutched at his throat, stifling his yelp. Why must you be such an abominable idiot? Growled Mako. Eben slapped futilely at the man's forearm. His breath came in rasps and only just deep enough to keep stars from dancing in his vision. It was a moment before Mako released him and Eben fell gasping to one knee. If you die, I will soon follow, said Mako. I may have no wish to see you dead, but I value my own skin more than yours. Halab is not bloodthirsty, never that, but should I fail to look after you, she will not tolerate my failure. You and I may both thank the sky that I posted guards over you. I am thankful, Eben said, the words coming rough through his phlegm. And your gratitude seems clear as well. He got slowly to his feet. Mako pushed him again, harder this time. Do not be flip with me, boy. Why have you been poking about the family Yaren when you should leave that to those who are practicing such things and will not draw the eye of murderers? We think they may lead us to Isra. Eben paused, unsure of how to proceed. Theron had been adamant that Mako not know they were working with Lilith. That is another thing, said Mako. You should not be bandying about with that Yaren girl. They are not to be trusted, even in the smallest of matters, certainly not in the search for Isra. Eben's heart sank. Mako knew then. It had been foolish to imagine he would not learn of it when he seemed to know everything Eben did. But if that knowledge now lay bare, then so be it. You forget what happened to her, said Eben. Isra took control of Lilith and caused her to be thrown to the Mystic's knives. We may have no common ground with the family Yaren as a whole, but we do with Lilith. You can trust no word from a Yaren, nor can you believe they will keep your confidence. What happens if you tell someone of the amulet your little friend carries? That stopped him. Eben stared at his feet. We have not told her of the amulet. To his surprise, Mako grinned. Well now, it seems you are not such a little fool. It seems you are not such a fool, little Eben, not such a complete one, anyway. Mighty praise, I suppose, said Eben. Now, do you wish to know what we have learned, or not? Quickly he laid it out, what Farah had said of Gregor and what Adara had told him about where the bodyguard had been spotted. Mako's eyes lit when he heard that. That is something valuable indeed. Sky above, Eben, you have fumbled your way through this dance of shadows better than I would have given you credit for, though one of my men died in the process, and that I will not quickly forget. Eben lowered his eyes. Nor will I. I will be forever grateful to his memory. Did he have a family? At first Mako only glared, but after looking into Eben's eyes for a long moment the glare softened. It is wiser not to ask such things, but at the same time I cannot fault you, for that is the sort of question that Halab might ask. Eben tried very hard not to let that compliment, small as it was, go to his head. Very well. Now that we know where Gregor lurks, we must go after him. We shall do nothing of the sort, but I will when the time is right. That is not good enough, said Eben. Every turn of the hourglass is another chance for Isra to strike at the academy, leaving more corpses in her wake. Do not worry yourself, said Mako. Since last she appeared, my people have been watching every way into the citadel. The passage is known and unknown. They will see her if she tries to enter. By the time they do and send word to you, it might already be too late. You must search for Gregor now, without delay. He wondered if the words sounded as hollow as they felt. They must have, for Mako looked skyward as though trying to choose the best way to countermand the shrill yapping of an infant. But after a moment he met Eben's gaze and shrugged. Very well, I will begin at once and search for him on the west end of the seat. Mayhap we should come with you, said Eben. There are your only hope against Isra if you should come upon her. No, said Mako, and there was no arguing against his tone. That would place you in danger, and that is the very thing my duties compel me to prevent. But what if Isra is with him and the strength of Magestone's behind her? Mako was silent for a long moment, gazing into Eben's eyes. Eben felt the chill steal across him. Isra had had the strength of Magestones the last time they had fought too, yet still she could not touch Mako. Eben tried not to cringe. He had drifted far too close to a truth he wanted to keep from Mako. At last the bodyguard spoke. Look after yourself and do not fear for my ability to do the same. And do not put yourself in peril, chasing after secrets all on your own. I will not, Eben mumbled. Good. I will find Gregor and likely Isra in the same place. The seat may be the High King's in name, but in another sense it belongs to those like me. I know its dark holes and the bodies within them, the gutters and the blood running through them. But while I'm busy myself with Gregor, you can make yourself useful as well. Keep your eyes and ears open when you are with that Yeren girl, and see what else you can learn of their deeds upon the seat. Eben frowned. That is not why we are working with her. Mako grinned. Good little Drayden boys can always do more than one thing at once. He slipped into a nearby hedge and vanished. Hey, Xenon Quark. Eben heard nothing from Mako the rest of that day. It troubled him, though he chided himself, for he should not have expected Mako to find anything so soon. When he woke the next day, he strode out upon the academy grounds, even turning his steps towards the secret door in hopes that Mako might find him to report back. But the grounds were empty. Eben left a scribbled note beneath the alabaster. Have you found him? And went to class. At his desk, he fiddled with the flower for a time, trying to see the parts of it with his mind's eye, but his thoughts were much occupied with Mako. What if the bodyguard had found Gregor already? What if something had happened to him? Eben wished he'd been able to come along. Even danger would be better than not knowing anything about what transpired beneath the streets. Yay, Xenon Quark. Yay for creating images. He pictured Mako down in the sewers just like the night he had killed Matami, only now the bodyguard was beset on all sides by Yaren's swords, green cloaks covering males. They pressed him back into the darkness. That made him shudder, and too it turned his thoughts to the night before last when he had been attacked, and he thought of the training grounds outside where advanced transmuters practiced their spells. Eben turned in his seat and raised his hand until Perrin came forward towards the front of the room to find him. What is it? I've been wondering, said Eben. Once when I first came here, I saw other transmuters, casting spells of defense. I saw a girl stop an arrow in mid-flight, turning it to a puff of smoke. Yes, said Perrin. What is it? What of it? Could I not practice such magic? I have made a little progress with my flower, and as you have said before, I might stretch my mind by turning it towards other things. Perrin chuckled. Other things, yes, but nothing so advanced. You are a long way off, I am afraid, from such magic, and also you saw those spells ages ago. Why the sudden interest now? No reason, Eben said quickly. Only I've just learned to counter another wizard's magic. I thought I might learn to defend myself against other things, like a fighter with a sword. Her brows rose. Have you found yourself pitted against fighters and swords? Eben blanched but tried to appear calm. Not at all. It is just that with the attack on the seat, and now with war in Feldemar, it seems the sort of thing that might be useful. I am sure I'm not the only one who feels the war hanging over us all. The classroom had gone curiously quiet. When he looked about, Eben saw that all the students had stopped in their work and were watching the two of them. Perrin looked at them all, and her stern countenance softened. I cannot blame you all for thinking such thoughts, she said. It is only natural that you do, but I urge you not to worry yourselves overmuch. Every member of the faculty here values your safety above all else, and we will let no harm befall you. Her look returned to Eben. That said, I will not hold it against you for wishing to learn spells that can keep you safe. But in ordinary circumstances, you would not even begin to learn them until your 3rd year, if then. Know that the required spells are many, and they must be learned one after the other, and they are not easy. Have any of my spells been easy thus far? Said Eben. At that she smiled. I suppose they have not seemed so. Very well. Learn first to turn a stone to ice and then to water. Once you master that, do the same with metal, the more difficult cousin of stone. Then learn to turn it faster and faster. In time, you may be able to stop a sword even as it hacks at you. Anyone coming at you with a blade will only find themselves wet. But I say again, you will not learn these spells quickly. I know it, instructor. Eben bowed his head. And thank you. She trundled off towards the back of the room again, and Eben returned to his flower. Astrea sat beside him as she usually did. Her eyes were fixed on her own rose, and he wondered if she had paid any attention at all to what had been said. But he did not wonder long, for she spoke after a moment. I wonder if I could do it, she muttered. Turn stone to water, I mean. Eben shrugged. She said it was an advanced 3rd-year trick. It would be a great surprise if you could. Her gaze rose to the classroom and then turned to him. I do not mean now, of course. I mean if mayhap I could learn it. Oh, never mind. Eben frowned, for her tone struck him as odd. Then he saw the flower in her hands. It was ice, crystal clear and beginning to drip on the table. Astrea, he said, eyes wide. She frowned and then looked down at her hands. With a cry, she leapt up, away from her bench. The rose fell from her fingers and shattered on the surface of the desk. Thundering footsteps sounded as Perrin ran towards them. What is it? She demanded. What is wrong? Then she saw the shards of ice on the table, already beginning to melt into droplets. Astrea, did you turn the flower? I suppose so, said Astrea. I was not paying attention. I did not mean to. But this is no sorrowful news, said Perrin, beaming. You are progressing fast, far faster than is normal or expected. Well done. Now fetch yourself another and see if you can do it again. She put a firm hand on Astrea's shoulder, giving it a little squeeze before she left them again, but Astrea did not go to fetch another flower. She only resumed her seat, splaying her hands out on the desk before her, and Eben saw that her fingers were shaking. Are you all right? He asked. How could I do that without meaning to? She whispered. I did not even notice my eyes fill with light. It might only have taken you a moment, he said, putting a confidence in his words that he did not feel. I know the first time I used my magic, the first time I really did anyway, other than the testing spell, it came upon me all in a rush, and I hardly knew what was happening. Yes, she said, still in a terrified whisper. Yes, that must be it. It must have happened in a flash. She met his look, trying desperately to smile, but Eben saw the dread within her and felt it mirrored in his own heart. Eben, you so emo. All right, I'm going to do one more chapter, and then I'm going to go. I have some stuff to do before I have an afternoon appointment, and then I'll probably come back and stream again after that. Chapter 22. That day, Eben felt a creeping suspicion come across him. Caleb and Theron could see it in him when they sat together in the library, but no matter how often they asked, he only shook his head and held his tongue. Before he went to dinner, he wrote a letter and placed it beneath the alabaster, where he saw that his note from that morning still waited untouched by Mako. He took the morning's note away and left a new one, which read, I fear the threat has entered the academy again. There are strange happenings afoot. Come and see me as quickly as you may. He returned to the dormitories and sat long in the common room, brooding as he stared into the fire. Astrea did not act like one under mind word, not exactly, but something strange was happening to her, and the last time Eben had seen academy students and faculty acting odd had been because of Ezra, and then the killing had begun. He could not let that happen again. No, I might nap after my appointment, but I think it would be dangerous to nap beforehand because Megan's not here to wake me up. The only thing he reassured him was that he did not believe Isra would harm Straya. Everyone she had controlled before had been used to terrible purpose, and most of them had died at the end, which he could not believe would happen. But if Isra did not hold the girl in bond of mindward, then what was going on? Mako did not see him that evening, but Eben thought he would hear from the bodyguard the next day. It passed, however, without word, and then most of the next day went by, and still there was no sign. Eben spent most of the day scowling, and his mood was not improved when he went out upon the grounds at lunch and found that his letter was gone from beneath the alabaster. So Mako had received his message and did not come to see him or left any message in reply. That made him irritable during their time in the library. At last Theron snapped her book shut and glared at him. Eben, you are simply insufferable. I never thought I would say this, but if you cannot study in peace, go and take yourself somewhere else so that we may. Eben knew he was in the wrong, and so he apologized and promised to be less grim, but that only meant he sat in silence while they read and did not answer when spoken to, and so it was hardly better. The moment the day's last bell rang out, Theron leapt up and threw a book on the table between the three of them. I am taking you out, she said, to some tavern where wine and supper may ease your mood. We cannot go, said Eben, aghast. What if Gregor and his men are lurking outside the citadel? Let him try to hurt you or any of us, snapped Theron. I have a mighty need to use my magic upon someone who deserves it in all its strength. So he let her drag him and Caleb out into the streets where they made their way to Levin's tavern close by, and soon had lost themselves in a bottle of wine. And just as Theron had promised, Eben soon found his mood improved tremendously. After a time he held his cup aloft, thrusting it towards Theron as if in toast. To my good friend Theron, he proclaimed, who knows me for a happy drunk, and darkness below take Mako anyway. Darkness below, said Theron, raising her own cup. That is a bit strong, I fear, said Caleb, joining them in the toast, but I will drink regardless, for good wine makes up for dark words. It depends on the darkness of the words and the strength of the wine, said Mako. Eben nearly spit out his drink. The bodyguard had appeared at the head of the table as if by magic. He pushed Eben hard to make room and then took a seat on the bench. Across the table, Caleb and Theron were staring, and after a moment, Eben realized why. Mako had a nasty bruise under his left eye, and the black sleeves that now covered his arms had wet spots. They could have been water, Eben supposed, but a voice in his mind whispered blood instead. Have you met your match in some barroom brawl, Mako? Said Theron. That seems no great surprise. You have always been boastful, and such pride often precedes downfall. Shut your flapping lips before I gut you, growled Mako. I am in no mood for jests tonight, especially after you have disobeyed my order and left the academy. Theron almost replied, but Eben silenced her with a stern look. He leaned close and lowered his voice. What has happened? Have you found him? I have, said Mako. And is that what happened to you? Said Caleb, pointing to his face. Mako sneered. No, gold shitter. It is only that I prefer a very particular sort of lover and have just come from his company. Caleb blinked. Eben frowned. You said you were in no mood for jests, nor am I. I left you word but have not heard from you. I gave you a way to reach me when you had information of value, said Mako, glaring at him. That does not mean I come to heal at your call. I obey Halab's orders, not yours. What have you come for, then, said Eben. What happened when you... Mako's hand darted forwards like a snake, closing over Eben's mouth and lower jaw. Be silent. That is what I have come here to tell you, but you have yammered on like starved puppies since the moment I sat. Unhand him, said Theron. A glow sprang into her eyes. Or I could make you, if you wish. The bodyguard glared at her for a long moment, and Eben's pulse thundered in his ears. Then Mako's fingers loosened and his hand withdrew. I found Gregor indeed, said Mako in a voice as calm as if nothing had happened. In the bowels of the sewers just where your lover said he would be, but Isra is there too, and he scowled. With her strength added to Gregor's, I need magic to vanquish her. Your magic. He pointed at Theron. You need us, said Theron, arching an eyebrow. Have the High King declare a holiday, for the impossible has come to pass. Mako has asked for help. Mako slammed a fist down at the table so hard that their cups, which were thankfully empty, overturned. I lost 2 soldiers tonight, he snarled. The black-eyed bitch killed them. The black-eyed sow killed them, so spare me your smug tone. You have the amulet and can be useful, so useful I will make you. Theron looked around to ensure no one was close enough to overhear. I have no wish to use the amulet openly, she said. We know the faculty are hunting for it. What if we are discovered? We will not be, said Mako. I mean to set the constables and mystics upon Yern, but not until we have done our business first. Until that happens, Yern wishes the presence of the king's law even less than we do. Theron dropped her gaze to her fidgeting fingers. Very well, she said with a sigh. Only let us be quick about it. Eben nodded. Very well. Mako, when can we move? Not we, said Mako, or at least not you. That made them stop. What do you mean, said Eben. I'm not staying behind. You certainly are, you damned fool, said Mako. How many times must I tell you that my duty compels me to protect you? I will not let my friends or you go into danger while I sit here in safety, said Eben firmly. Theron shook her head. I can look after myself well enough. You'll be no great help in a fight, Eben. Forgive me, but it is true. I know it, and I know, too, that you are that you are most capable. I will not go because the two of you need me. I will go because it is my duty, or at least I call it so. And what else is duty, after all? The same goes for me, said Caleb, and you cannot tell me to stay behind if you bring Evan, for I might actually be able to help you. Meaning no offense, of course, Evan. Evan waved it off. It is decided, then. When do we mean to move? Mako glared at him, but he must have seen the resolve in Evan's eyes, for after a moment he sighed. You'll obey my every order no matter what, he said. If I tell you to run, you will run, even if you abandon me. If I tell you to hide, you will hide. I swear it, said Evan. When? Now. At that they balked, even Evan. Now, he said, this moment? Yes, said Mako. I've only just come from a fight with Yaren soldiers. They will redress their defenses. They may even move their activities to some other dark hole now that we know where they are. If it is not tonight, it will be never. Are you ready? Evan swallowed hard. We are. Very well, said Mako, standing from the table. Do not make me regret this. Let us go. Chapter 20. Okie dokes. That's it for me this morning. Morning, afternoon, you know. Gotta do my daily activities and then go to my appointment. And then I probably will nap after that because I'm very tired after yesterday. Birthday! Woo! But thanks for coming and hanging out. And I very much look forward to seeing you all later, if possible. And if not, it will certainly be on another stream. Oy, we're so close to the end of this goddamn project. Oy, oy, oy. Alright, y'all. I am going to end stream now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all later.